Hello, history enthusiasts, and welcome to The Historical Records. I'm Jaiban, your guide through the fascinating journey of India's modern history, spanning from 1757 to 1950. Today, we're embarking on a captivating YouTube journey to explore the incredible story of modern India. So, grab your virtual passports, and let's dive into a time when India was transforming before our very eyes. In the mid-18th century, the Indian subcontinent was a land of rich and diverse cultures, comprising numerous kingdoms and princely states. This period marked a crucial juncture in India's history as it witnessed significant political, social, and economic changes, beneath the colorful tapestry of India's regional kingdoms and empires. The British East India Company emerged as a formidable force that would go on to shape the destiny of the subcontinent. In 1757, this powerful trading company made a significant and lasting impact on the Indian subcontinent with its arrival on the shores of the Bay of Bengal. The arrival of the British East India Company in 1757 was a pivotal moment that set the stage for a series of events that would ultimately lead to British colonial rule in India. This narrative will delve deeper into the background of India during this period and explore the circumstances and consequences of the British East India Company's arrival, which marked the beginning of a new era in India's history. Battle of Plassey, 1757. In the wake of the British East India Company's arrival in India, one of the most pivotal events occurred at the Battle of Plassey in 1757. This battle, fought in the fertile plains of Bengal, saw the British East India Company pitted against the forces of Siraj-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Bengal. The battle, often regarded as a turning point in Indian history, resulted in a decisive victory for the British. Robert Clive, the company's astute military commander, used a combination of strategic alliances and political maneuvering to secure victory. The aftermath of Plassey allowed the company to establish its control over Bengal, a key province, and marked the beginning of their territorial expansion in India. Battle of Buxar, 1764. The Battle of Buxar, fought in 1764, further solidified British control over northern India. This battle involved the British East India Company, led by Major Hector Munro, facing an alliance of Indian rulers, including the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, Shuja-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Oudh, and Mir Qasim, the Nawab of Bengal. Despite being outnumbered, the British prevailed due to their disciplined troops and advanced weaponry. The outcome of the Battle of Buxar not only extended British influence over Oudh and Bihar but also led to the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765, granting the company the Diwani, the right to collect revenue, of Bengal, Bihar, and Oudh from the Mughal Emperor. This marked a significant step toward British dominance over vast swathes of India. These two crucial battles, Plassey and Buxar, played pivotal roles in the early expansion and consolidation of British rule in India. They set the stage for the subsequent establishment of British colonial authority over the Indian subcontinent, which would last for nearly 2 centuries, profoundly impacting India's history, society, and culture. Company rule and administrative changes. Regulating Act of 1773. The Regulating Act of 1773 was a significant legislative milestone in the history of British rule in India. It marked the British government's growing involvement in the affairs of the British East India Company. The act aimed to address the rampant corruption and mismanagement within the company's administration. It established a Governor-General of Bengal, Warren Hastings being the first to hold this position, and a Supreme Council in Calcutta to oversee British interests in India. The act also imposed regulations on the company's activities and attempted to bring greater accountability to their rule. Charter Act of 1813. The Charter Act of 1813 was another crucial piece of legislation during the company's rule. It was significant because it granted permission for Christian missionaries to operate in India, contributing to the spread of Christianity. Additionally, it set aside funds for the promotion of education in India, marking the beginnings of Western-style education. This act also extended the company's charter for another 20 years, further solidifying its presence on the Indian subcontinent. See Sepoy Mutiny or First War of Independence, 1857 to 1858, causes and outbreak. The Sepoy Mutiny, also known as the First War of Independence, erupted in 1857. It was a watershed moment in Indian history. The causes were multifaceted, including discontent among Indian soldiers, sepoys, due to perceived cultural insensitivity, the use of animal fat in rifle cartridges, and underlying grievances against British rule. The spark was lit when sepoys in Meerut revolted on May 10, 1857. This uprising quickly spread to other parts of India, with both soldiers and civilians joining the rebellion, uniting against British rule. Suppression and consequences. The British suppression of the revolt was brutal, marked by intense battles, massacres, and atrocities on both sides. The revolt was eventually quelled by the British in 1858. The consequences were far-reaching. It led to the end of the rule of the British East India Company, as the British Crown took direct control of India through the Government of India Act of 1858. It also prompted significant changes in British policies and attitudes towards India, including more sensitivity to Indian customs and religions. Crown Rule and the British Raj, Government of India Act 1858. The Government of India Act of 1858 marked the beginning of direct British Crown rule in India, often referred to as the British Raj. Under this act, Queen Victoria assumed the title of Empress of India, and as Secretary of State for India was appointed in the British Cabinet. The Governor-General of India became the Viceroy of India, representing the British monarch's authority. This marked a shift from the rule of the British East India Company to a more direct form of British governance. Queen Victoria's Proclamation, 1858. Queen Victoria's Proclamation of 1858 was a declaration of the British Crown's intentions towards India. In it, Queen Victoria promised a policy of religious tolerance and non-interference in Indian customs and traditions. While the proclamation sought to ease Indian fears, its practical implementation varied over time. Socio-economic changes and reforms, land revenue systems, zamindari, rayatwari. During British rule, two prominent land revenue systems were implemented in India. The zamindari system involved intermediaries, known as zamindars, who collected land revenue from peasants and passed a portion of it to the British government. In contrast, the rayatwari system involved direct settlement of revenue with individual peasant farmers. These systems had significant social and economic implications, shaping landownership patterns and agrarian relationships, education and social reform movements. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, etc. British rule in India also brought about changes in education and social reform. Visionaries like Raja Ram Mohan Roy spearheaded efforts to modernize education and promote social reforms, including the abolition of practices like sati and child marriage. They played a crucial role in advocating for social change and laying the foundation for a more progressive and inclusive society. Nationalist movement. The nationalist movement in India emerged as a response to British colonial rule. It gained momentum in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru at the forefront. The movement aimed to secure India's independence from British rule through non-violent civil disobedience, protests, and political activism. It ultimately led to India's independence on August 15, 1947, marking the end of nearly 2 centuries of British colonial rule in India and the birth of the modern Indian nation. Moderates and extremists. During the Indian freedom struggle, there were two distinct groups within the Indian National Congress, the moderates and the extremists. Role of leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Dadabhai Naoroji, and Annie Besant. Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, also known as Lokmanya, was a prominent leader of the extremist faction. He advocated for more aggressive and direct methods to achieve independence. Tilak believed that the struggle for freedom required mass mobilization and the use of cultural and religious symbols to unite the people. He popularized the concept of Swaraj or self-rule and played a crucial role in inspiring nationalist sentiments, especially among the youth. Dadabhai Naoroji was a leading moderate within the Indian National Congress. He is famously known as the Grand Old Man of India. Naoroji was a staunch advocate of constitutional methods and diplomacy. He was the first Indian to be elected to the British House of Commons. His famous work, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, highlighted the economic exploitation of India by the British and was instrumental in shaping the nationalist discourse. Annie Besant was a British theosophist and a leader of the Indian National Congress. She was an influential figure in the extremist camp and worked towards achieving Indian self-rule. Besant played a crucial role in the Home Rule movement, which sought to gain self-governance within the British Empire. Her efforts helped galvanize public opinion and strengthen the demand for Indian autonomy. The Indian subcontinent witnessed several significant revolts and uprisings against British colonial rule during its period of imperial dominance. Three of the most notable revolts were the Sipahi Revolt, the Swadeshi Movement, also known as the Swaraj Andolan, and the Quit India Movement, Foryeezy Andolan. Here's a detailed description of each. Sipahi Revolt, 1857 to 1858. The Sipahi Revolt, also known as the Indian Rebellion of 1857 or the Sepoy Mutiny, was a watershed moment in India's struggle for independence. The trigger for the revolt was the introduction of the Enfield rifle, which required soldiers to bite off the tips of greased cartridges, rumored to be coated with animal fat. This offended the religious sensibilities of both Hindu and Muslim sepoys, Indian soldiers in the British East India Company's army. The revolt began in Meerut in May 1857 and quickly spread to various parts of India, including Delhi, Kanpur, and Lucknow. The rebels aimed to overthrow British rule and restore Indian sovereignty. They were joined by various sections of society, including peasants, artisans, and nobility. Leaders like Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, Bahadur Shah II, Kunwar Singh, and Nana Sahib played pivotal roles in the uprising. The British eventually crushed the revolt through a combination of military force and political cunning. It marked the end of the Mughal Empire. As Bahadur Shah II was exiled to Rangoon, Yangon, after the British recaptured Delhi, while the revolt did not immediately lead to Indian independence, it sowed the seeds of nationalism and resistance against colonial rule. Swadeshi Movement, Swaraj Andolan, 1905 to 1911. The Swadeshi Movement, also known as the Swaraj Andolan, was a protest against the partition of Bengal by the British in 1905. The partition was seen as a deliberate attempt to divide the Bengali-speaking population and weaken nationalist sentiment. The movement called for the boycotting of British goods and the promotion of Indian-made products. People began to wear and use Swadeshi, locally made, goods. Intellectuals and leaders like Rabindranath Tagore, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Aurobindo Ghosh played a significant role in mobilizing public opinion. The Swadeshi movement eventually led to the annulment of the Bengal partition in 1911. A significant victory for the Indian nationalist cause. Quit India Movement, Foryeezy Andolan, 1942. The Quit India Movement, also known as the Foryeezy Andolan, was a major civil disobedience movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi and the Indian National Congress during World War II. The movement demanded an immediate end to British rule in India. Quit India was the clarion call, urging the British to leave India and let Indians determine their own destiny. The British responded with a crackdown, arresting many leaders, including Gandhi, and suppressing the movement through force. Despite its initial suppression, the Quit India movement had a profound impact on the course of India's struggle for independence. It galvanized the masses and demonstrated the determination of Indians to achieve freedom. Eventually, World War II and the global geopolitical situation contributed to the British decision to leave India, leading to independence in 1947. Struggle for independence, 1930 to 1947, Non-Cooperation Movement, 1920 to 1922, led by Mahatma Gandhi. The non-cooperation movement was a significant phase in the struggle for independence led by Mahatma Gandhi. It began in 1920 and aimed to non-violently resist British rule by refusing to cooperate with colonial institutions. Gandhi called for boycotting British goods, schools, and institutions, and instead promoted Swadeshi, local self-reliance. His leadership and philosophy of non-violence inspired millions of Indians to join the movement. Mass participation and its impact. The non-cooperation movement witnessed unprecedented mass participation across India. People from all walks of life, including students, farmers, and workers, enthusiastically took part in protests, demonstrations, and non-cooperation activities. The movement had a profound impact on Indian society and politics, making it clear to the British that their rule was untenable without Indian support. Although the movement was suspended in 1922 following the Chauri Chowra incident, it laid the groundwork for future struggles: Civil Disobedience Movement, 1930 to 1934, Salt March and Dandi Satyagraha. The Civil Disobedience Movement, initiated by Mahatma Gandhi in 1930, aimed to challenge the British monopoly on salt and other oppressive colonial policies. Gandhi's iconic Salt March, which began in Sabarmati Ashram and culminated at Dandi Beach, involved a 240-mile journey where thousands of Indians joined him in defying the salt tax by making their salt from seawater. This act of civil disobedience symbolized the broader resistance to British rule. Repression and negotiations. The civil disobedience movement faced severe repression from the British authorities, with many protesters arrested and jailed. Despite the repression, the movement continued, and negotiations between Indian leaders and the British government began. The Gandhi-Irwin Pact of 1931 was a notable result of these negotiations, leading to the release of political prisoners and marked a temporary truce between the two sides. See World War II and Quit India Movement, 1942, Nationalist Demands and British Response. During World War II, Indian nationalists sought a commitment from the British for post-war independence as a reward for their support during the war. When the British government did not meet these demands, the Quit India movement was launched in 1942. This movement demanded an immediate end to British rule and the launch of the process for the establishment of a free Indian government. Incarceration of leaders. In response to the Quit India movement, the British government arrested prominent Indian leaders, including Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and others. The movement faced severe repression, and large-scale protests and strikes erupted across the country. Despite the arrests and the suppression of the movement, it further intensified the demand for independence and contributed to the eventual withdrawal of British rule from India in 1947. Post-war developments and mounting pressure for independence. Naval Mutiny, 1946. The Naval Mutiny of 1946 was a significant event that added to the mounting pressure for independence in British India. It began as a protest by Indian sailors of the Royal Indian Navy against the discriminatory treatment and harsh working conditions imposed by the British officers. However, it quickly transformed into a widespread and coordinated revolt, with the sailors raising demands for better pay, equal treatment, and the release of political prisoners. The mutiny spread to several naval vessels and shore establishments across Bombay, now Mumbai, Karachi, and Calcutta, now Kolkata. The mutineers also hoisted the Indian national flag on some ships, signaling their allegiance to the cause of Indian independence. The mutiny posed a significant challenge to British authority, and it marked a turning point in the struggle for freedom. Mountbatten Plan and Partition, 1947. The Mountbatten Plan, officially known as the Indian Independence Act of 1947, was a crucial development that led to the end of British colonial rule in India and the partition of the Indian subcontinent into two independent nations, India and Pakistan. Lord Louis Mountbatten, the last Viceroy of India, played a pivotal role in overseeing the transition to independence. The plan, announced in June 1947, set a timeline for the transfer of power. According to the plan, India would become independent on August 15, 1947. Additionally, it offered princely states the choice to join either India or Pakistan or to remain independent. The partition of India, based on religious lines, was a traumatic and violent process that resulted in widespread communal riots and the displacement of millions of people. On August 15, 1947, India and Pakistan emerged as independent nations, with Jawaharlal Nehru becoming India's first Prime Minister and Muhammad Ali Jinnah leading Pakistan as its founder. The Mountbatten Plan marked the culmination of years of struggle for independence and the beginning of a new era in the history of the Indian subcontinent. While it granted India and Pakistan their long-awaited freedom, it also left behind a legacy of communal tensions and challenges that both nations had to confront in the years to come. Partition of India. Radcliffe Line. The Radcliffe Line refers to the boundary demarcation line drawn by Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer who had never been to India before, to partition the Indian subcontinent into two independent nations, India and Pakistan, in 1947. The line was meant to separate regions with a Muslim majority, which would become Pakistan, from those with a Hindu majority, which would remain in India. The partition was based on religious lines, dividing provinces, regions, and even families. Radcliffe's line, which was kept top secret until it was announced, led to the division of Punjab and Bengal, resulting in significant controversies and disputes over the allocation of territories, resources, and population. The arbitrary nature of the border often led to communities being separated and property disputes that caused considerable hardship, mass migration, and communal violence. The partition of India witnessed one of the largest mass migrations in human history, with millions of people on both sides of the border uprooted from their homes and forced to move to their respective nations. This mass migration was accompanied by widespread communal violence, as religious tensions flared, leading to horrific riots, killings, and atrocities. Trains carrying refugees often arrived at their destinations with the dead and injured. The communal violence during the partition remains a dark chapter in the history of the subcontinent, leaving scars that continue to affect India and Pakistan's relationship and the communal dynamics within the two nations. Independence and the birth of two nations. India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, a close associate of Mahatma Gandhi, became India's first Prime Minister upon the country's independence in 1947. He was a visionary leader who played a crucial role in shaping India's future as a democratic and secular nation. Nehru's leadership was marked by a commitment to social justice, secularism, and economic development. He laid the foundation for India's democratic institutions, emphasizing education, scientific temper, and industrialization. His tenure as Prime Minister set the tone for India's political and economic policies for decades to come. Pakistan's creation and leadership under Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, often referred to as the Quaid-e-Azam, great leader, was the driving force behind the creation of Pakistan. He served as Pakistan's first Governor-General until his death in 1948. Jinnah was a staunch advocate for the rights of Muslims in India and played a pivotal role in the demand for a separate Muslim-majority state. Under his leadership, Pakistan emerged as an independent nation on August 14, 1947. Jinnah's vision for Pakistan was of a modern, democratic state where Muslims could freely practice their religion. However, his death shortly after independence left Pakistan with the challenges of nation-building and defining its identity, which continue to shape the country's trajectory to this day. The partition of India and the simultaneous emergence of India and Pakistan marked a momentous and complex period in South Asian history. It had far-reaching consequences, including the displacement of millions, communal tensions, and the establishment of two independent nations with distinct political, cultural, and religious identities. The making of the Indian Constitution, 1947 to 1950, a Constituent Assembly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and the Drafting Committee, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, a prominent leader and scholar, played a pivotal role in the framing of the Indian Constitution. He was appointed as the chairman of the Drafting Committee, responsible for drafting the Constitution's text. Ambedkar's contributions were instrumental in ensuring that the Constitution enshrined principles of justice, equality, and social rights. His tireless efforts in drafting the Constitution also led to the inclusion of provisions that aimed at uplifting the marginalized and oppressed sections of society, particularly the scheduled castes. Debates and discussions. The Constituent Assembly of India, formed in 1947, consisted of representatives from diverse backgrounds, regions, and communities. The Assembly engaged in extensive debates and discussions over the Constitution's provisions. These debates covered a wide range of topics, including federalism, fundamental rights, minority rights, and the role of the president. The Assembly members passionately deliberated on these issues to create a constitution that reflected India's pluralistic society and the aspirations of its people. Adoption of the Constitution, January 26, 1950, Republic Day and the New Era, January 26, 1950. holds special significance in Indian history as it marks the day when the Indian Constitution came into effect. This date is celebrated annually as Republic Day in India. On this historic day, India transitioned from being a dominion under British rule to becoming a sovereign republic. The adoption of the Constitution signified the culmination of India's struggle for independence and the beginning of a new era of self-governance. The making of the Indian Constitution, 1947 to 1950, a Constituent Assembly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and the Drafting Committee, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, a prominent leader and scholar, played a pivotal role in the framing of the Indian Constitution. He was appointed as the chairman of the Drafting Committee, responsible for drafting the Constitution's text. Ambedkar's contributions were instrumental in ensuring that the Constitution enshrined principles of justice, equality, and social rights. His tireless efforts in drafting the Constitution also led to the inclusion of provisions that aimed at uplifting the marginalized and oppressed sections of society, particularly the scheduled castes. Debates and discussions. The Constituent Assembly of India, formed in 1947, consisted of representatives from diverse backgrounds, regions, and communities. The Assembly engaged in extensive debates and discussions over the Constitution's provisions. These debates covered a wide range of topics, including federalism, fundamental rights, minority rights, and the role of the president. The Assembly members passionately deliberated on these issues to create a constitution that reflected India's pluralistic society and the aspirations of its people. Adoption of the Constitution, January 26, 1950, Republic Day and the New Era, January 26, 1950, holds special significance in Indian history as it marks the day when the Indian Constitution came into effect. This date is celebrated annually as Republic Day in India. On this historic day, India transitioned from being a dominion under British rule to becoming a sovereign republic. The adoption of the Constitution signified the culmination of India's struggle for independence and the beginning of a new era of self-governance. Key features and principles. The Indian Constitution, adopted on January 26, 1950, embodies several key features and principles. Sovereign and democratic. The Constitution declares India as a sovereign, socialist, secular, and democratic republic, emphasizing the principles of equality, justice, and liberty for all citizens. Fundamental rights. It guarantees fundamental rights to all citizens, including the right to equality, freedom of speech and expression, and protection against discrimination. Directive principles of state policy. The Constitution includes directive principles that guide the government in promoting social and economic justice, ensuring the welfare of citizens, and reducing inequalities. Federal structure. India's federal structure divides powers between the central government and states, with a clear distribution of responsibilities and authority. Separation of powers. It enforces the separation of powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. Amendment procedure. The Constitution provides a mechanism for its own amendment to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining its core values. The adoption of the Indian Constitution represented a momentous achievement in nation building. It reflected the aspirations of a diverse and pluralistic society and laid the foundation for India's democratic governance, ensuring the protection of individual rights and the pursuit of social justice. Republic Day continues to be celebrated with great enthusiasm in India as a reminder of the country's commitment to its constitutional values and principles. India's journey from colonial rule to independence was a long and arduous struggle that spanned over a century. It was marked by the resilience, determination, and sacrifices of countless individuals who yearned for freedom and self-determination. The struggle was characterized by a spectrum of leaders, ideologies, and movements, from the nonviolence of Mahatma Gandhi to the more radical approaches of leaders like Subhas Chandra Bose. The pivotal moments, such as the non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, and the sacrifices made during the World Wars, demonstrated India's unwavering commitment to securing its sovereignty. The culmination of this struggle led to the historic partition of the subcontinent into two independent nations, India and Pakistan, in 1947. Challenges and opportunities in the post-independence era. the post-independence era in India was a time of both immense challenges and unprecedented opportunities. The challenges included the traumatic aftermath of partition, which led to communal violence and mass migration. India also had to grapple with economic disparities, poverty, and the task of nation-building across its diverse population. However, the nation was blessed with remarkable leaders such as Jawaharlal Nehru, who championed democracy, secularism, and social justice. India adopted a democratic constitution that guaranteed fundamental rights and established a framework for governance. The five-year plans, initiated in the 1950s, aimed at economic development and self-reliance. Over the years, India made significant strides in various fields, including agriculture, education, space exploration, and technology. It emerged as the world's largest democracy, with a thriving civil society and a robust parliamentary system. While the journey was not without its setbacks, India's commitment to democratic values and the resilience of its people have allowed the nation to overcome many challenges. It continues to evolve and address new opportunities and obstacles in the 21st century. In conclusion, India's transition from colonial rule to independence was a monumental achievement that marked the end of centuries of foreign dominance. The post-independence era brought its own set of trials, but India's commitment to democracy and progress has allowed it to emerge as a prominent player on the global stage, with a promising future ahead. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe and stay with us.